Hello and welcome to the India Hangout. If Mahatma Gandhi was alive today and perhaps contesting for elections, what would it have been like? Well, that question can be put in many forms, but we decided to put it to someone who is an authority of sorts on the subject of Mahatma Gandhi and the Mahatma Gandhi as we would view him today, perhaps in a contemporary context. The author of the book Music of the Spinning Wheel, Sudheendra Kulkarni, and well-known journalist and BJP activist. Thank you so much.
No, not a BJP activist.
Okay, no longer. Okay, and Ayaz Memon at Cricketwala as always. Yes. Sudheendra, thank you very much for joining us. Your book is fascinating reading, though as many must have told you, it's quite long and it's 701 pages. But I think you've tried to do something very interesting. You've tried to address two things. One is the fallacy, or as you argue, that Mahatma Gandhi was against technology, and the second part is to see how that his actually being pro-technology through the use of the charkha is contextual to today's environment. So let's begin with the first before we come to today's environment. Why was there, or is there, that continuing fallacy that he was against technology? Is it only because of the use of the spinning wheel?
You see, Mahatma Gandhi is perhaps the only leader in the world who led a national liberation struggle using technology as symbol. For him, the spinning wheel was a symbol as well as substance. You know, he was conveying a very profound message through the spinning wheel. One, that it was a symbol of protest, that it was protest against colonial rule that had ravaged India's economy, India's industrial base, manufacturing base, and had turned millions and millions of people into poverty. So he, writes again and again that technology is a great gift of God. Science, human knowledge, of which technology is the product, must not be used for exploitation, for violence, and as is being used by European powers and Britain in our case, and therefore he chose what can be called the most primitive end of technology. The spinning wheel has been in existence almost as long as human civilization has been in existence. Right. So he chose the most simple thing to convey the message. One, a message of protest against colonial rule, also protest against misuse of technology. But he was not against technology per se, not against modern science per se, and this is a fallacy that has perhaps endured because of his appearance. He was rustic by choice. He was a fairly wealthy lawyer when he was in South Africa. If you see some of his earlier pictures,
yeah, dapper.
But
well dressed.
Yes, and he gave it all up. He gave it all up because he said that I must live like my countrymen. And I must go to the extreme end of simplicity. Not many people know that one of the two ashrams, in fact the last ashram that he set up in India, it's called Sevagram. There is a whole chapter in my book where I've said Sevagram is in fact an R&D center for him. Now, Sevagram was his residence, was his address for the last 11 years of his life. He chose the most difficult place, the most inaccessible place, the hottest place in India at the center. It's close to Nagpur. And he set up an ashram because he wanted to live like the poor of India. But as I said, he converted that into an R&D center where he conducted amazing experiments in science, in health science, in dietary science, in so many village industries. So today's people, they think, oh, he was spinning the charkha, he insisted on rural industry, so he is backward looking. He did not believe in modern science, which is just not true.
Okay. So now let's bring you to the present, right? So why is this important today? Why must we revisit Gandhi and understand this construct better?
See, Gandhi represents some of the eternal values of human civilization. They are eternal and they are universal. Irrespective of the changes in science, technology, so-called modernity, these values don't change, such as truth, non-violence, justice. So he continues to be eternally relevant.
Right.
Take for example, a few years ago, the United Nations declared October 2 as the Global Day of Non-Violence, which is a unique recognition. Why? Because in a world that is still so violent, violence of so many types, the world recognizes that he is a moral force. And we need to celebrate, we need to understand the message of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, this is a recognition given not just by India, it's a recognition given by the world.
Right.
So, his relevance for non-violence, his relevance for politics, because we are in the midst of, or rather at the fag end of a very long election process.
Long, heated.
And you have, you have titled, the theme of this discussion, to make it relevant to today's condition.
Yes.
For him, politics was not for power. He never contested an election, and he would not have contested an election even today if he were alive.
But that's also a criticism in some ways.
No, you see, we need people in the country who are in politics, but not for power. Who act as a moral authority, moral force, to keep society and keep polity in the right direction, on the right course. If we don't have that moral authority, the moral compass, you see what is happening in the country today. So for him, he says there's a very, people used to regard him as a Mahatma. He never called himself a Mahatma. No? He says, I am not a saint who strayed into politics. I'm not a saint who strayed into politics. I'm rather a politician who is trying to be a saint. He says, I'm not a saint. I'm just trying to be. I'm all the time perfecting myself. So today his message would have been that politicians must set an example to the rest of society. Because if there is corruption in politics, there is bound to be corruption in society. If there is lack of cooperation, if there is extreme rivalry, if there is extreme nepotism and all that we see today, then it is bound to be replicated in society. So he would have been a very, very different kind of a person in public life as he was in his own lifetime.
So Sudheendra, he made a virtue out of being a misfit in his times. In a sense, he was anarchic to the existing or the prevailing ethos, political ethos of that time. And obviously because he confronted the British or our colonial masters in a very unique and different way, he actually befuddled everybody. Now, if you juxtapose him in the current scenario, he is not fighting a foreign colonial force. These are his own people doing things which he may or may not approve of. How do you see him if he had been here? When we talk of the relevance of Gandhi, what would he have done? These are Indians he is talking about, polarized Indians in many ways. What would he have been like?
It's a very important question.
And can I add a quick supplementary to that, because there's a question that's come in from Anaga. She says, and a politician of today that reminds you most of what Gandhi would have been were he alive. First, Ayaz's question.
You see, for Mahatma Gandhi, as I said, politics was a means of social transformation, and in his time it was a means of national liberation. But then, he really attached a very profound and very unconventional meaning to swaraj. If you understand swaraj as freedom, as national liberation, for him,
Hind Swaraj.
Swaraj was not just Hind Swaraj, Hind ka Swaraj. And therefore, in Hind Swaraj itself, in 1909, he gives his understanding of what is Swaraj. Swaraj is Swa par Raj, not Swa ka Raj. Swa par Raj, that is rule over oneself, not just self-rule. So therefore, after independence, India the people of India, the communities in India and individuals in India, if they do not exercise this rule over self, then society is bound to go astray. So swaraj, swa-adheen, swadhinata, in Hindi we have a beautiful name for freedom, which is not quite captured in English language. What is swadhinata? Swadhinata means swa par adheenata. Adheen is control, self-control, self-restraint. That was Gandhiji's message and method.
One of Gandhi's contemporaries, of course he died much earlier, 1936 I think he died, 38, was Allama Iqbal.
Of course.
और बहुत एक फेमस उनका शेर है कि खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना कि खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है. So that's the control over the self.
Control over self. And today, I recently tweeted, after this Mumbai Indians and I think which is the team that you should know, Stark plays for.
Oh yes, that's for Bangalore, Royal Challengers Bangalore.
There was a very ugly spat,
slugfest
between not just Halla Gulla, it really became physical.
Yes.
Between Stark and Pollard. So I said, I hope that the next Lok Sabha does not witness such ugly scenes.
I remember that. I retweeted that.
And therefore, both politicians and players, they need to exercise self-restraint. And the meaning of Swaraj is nothing but self-control. And that is, that really, we have to keep in mind all the time. And Gandhiji had the audacity and the courage to say that I am not a servant of India, I am a servant of truth. And he equated God with truth. I am a servant of God, I am not a servant of India. And he says, if India of my dreams does not come true, and if India makes some horrible mistakes, then I will defy India. It takes enormous courage to say such a thing.
Some people say he was anarchic.
But anarchic to show the right way to society and to the world.
So then there are more questions coming in. It's I guess in the same direction. It says, how would he be relevant in today's world where you have constant social media discourse? Is there any place for a sane conversation? Because there it was, there was something said, the newspapers carried it, but today it would be a 360-degree barrage of attacks.
That is why Gandhiji is even more relevant, because he was completely transparent. He was not afraid of anything. The nature of transparency in his personal life is something unimaginable, including in matters of his own sexuality. So he would not have been afraid of the social media at all. In fact, I have argued in my book that he would have been the first one to embrace social media, Twitter, Facebook. He used to write hundreds of letters. When his right hand exhausted, tired, he would write with left hand.
Really?
Yes. You should go to Gandhi Museum in Delhi. You should see the kind of letters that he has written and what common people have written to him. So, social media, he would have.
And he was an organizer of people.
He would have loved the social media because brevity was his signature.
And instantly.
Do or die, karo ya maro. What does it doesn't even take. Twitter has 140 characters. In 50 characters, he conveyed his message. Truth and non-violence are as old as hills.
So, let me bring you back to, bring you to one of the dilemmas that we are constantly faced with, and question therefore we are posing. How much of the heightened, let's say the heightened animosity that we see today is really because of the specific nature of these elections, and how much of it is something that has permanently changed in the way we behave or the way we relate to each other and so on as politicians?
Or in the nature of electoral politics, because let's not forget that when Gandhi was alive, we hadn't had elections.
There were elections in 1937, but therefore they were very different kind.
Yeah.
See, important thing is that in any society, today's or in the eras gone by, differences of views, difference of perception, difference of interest are bound to be there, and they were there even at that time. And there were many people who very strongly disagreed with him.
Ambedkar, as you also pointed out.
Subhash Bose, and sometimes even Nehru, and of course people like Savarkar. But what is very unique about Gandhi is that he respected all of them. He respected, and you should, the correspondence between Gandhiji and Ambedkar, for example, they show how, in spite of very intense criticism, he showed not just respect but understanding. He says that I must understand Ambedkar because I am not born in the condition, the social condition in which he was born. So I must make an extra effort to understand him.
And then
I must, not many people know that it was Gandhiji who persuaded the Congress leadership to bring Dr. Ambedkar into the Constituent Assembly.
And then Minister.
Because at that time Dr. Ambedkar did not have much of a social or political following. But he said that he's good at law, constitution matters, and nation should benefit from his knowledge. So it is because of Gandhiji's intervention that he was made chairman of the
Constituent Assembly.
The drafting committee.
The drafting committee, but okay, he was pushed into the Constituent Assembly.
The interim government, 1946. The Prime Minister was of course Jawaharlal Nehru. He said that they should be both Ambedkar and Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. Both of them were not in the Congress, but Mahatma Ji said that both should be there in the interim government because the first government of India should be truly national in character. It should represent all different points of view. See, that kind of tolerance is missing today.
Okay. Questions coming in, Sudheendra. So there is, someone says, I don't think Gandhi has any relevance today, which is also why AAP, who tried to emulate some of those ideals, somehow did not cut through. She adds, to me, one of AAP's mistakes was the belief that leaving Delhi was more Gandhian, but it did not work for them.
Let's not take one example of what AAP did or did not do.
Okay. But the larger idea of AAP?
You see, AAP and what the precursor to AAP, that is the movement against corruption led by Anna Hazare. Anna Hazare himself, he represented some of Gandhian ideals. And it is for the first time in India's history after the anti-emergency struggle that the common people, educated people, came onto the streets wearing a Gandhi cap.
Correct.
People had forgotten Gandhi cap, but Gandhi cap became popular. It was not just a fashion statement, it was a statement of idealism. Now,
or rather, it was a statement of idealism and also a fashion statement.
But then you see, one faction of that movement decided to turn itself into a political party, and politics, electoral politics, has its own dynamics. And AAP, we should see how well it does in the coming elections. But you see, any political party, if it stays committed to its own ideals and ideology, is bound to get a chance.
It will get traction.
It will get traction. That's the nature of democratic politics.
Okay. So, so the question is, you're saying that basically the Anna Hazare agitation being the source of the AAP is truer to the Gandhian principles of...
No, I'm saying that it represented some of the Gandhian ideals.
Okay.
So, insofar as it raised a voice of protest against corruption, but it was, Gandhian ideology, let's not use the word ideology, but Gandhian worldview is far more
than fighting anti-corruption,
comprehensive, holistic than just fighting corruption.
Okay. So, to come back to the point that I was asking you, I said, okay, there is a certain level of discourse that we are seeing today in the heightened and heightened animosity perhaps in the political context. What lies beyond this, right? So, elections will soon get over in a matter of days. A new dispensation will be announced. Are we ready to go back to a slightly more calmer, saner world? One. Two, and are we then ready to receive some of the Gandhian principles that you talk of in the modern context and then build on them?
See, responding to your first question, one hopes, and this is the hope of millions and millions of people of India, that the acrimony that has marked the election campaign would be a thing of the past, and whosoever gets the mandate is respected by others, and one hopes that India gets a stable government, but that stable government also must remain true to the foundational principles of our constitution, of which secularism is very much a very important foundational principle. That respect for all faiths, respect for all communities, no discrimination whatsoever, no injustice, security for all. And this is again where we have to learn from Mahatma Gandhi. You know, for him, he says that for me, Hindu-Muslim harmony and unity is far more important than even independence. Independence can wait, but not Hindu-Muslim unity. And ultimately, you know, he became a martyr to the cause of Hindu-Muslim unity.
Right. So, Sudheendra, how do we, take this to the young Indian sort of, because finally, I mean, this is about saying how do we, you've described it, but I think the question now would be, how do we take these messages or some of these constructs to young people who will perhaps embrace them and then, use them
to
in
answer
their
your
own
question, Govind, I have mentioned in my book, my own journey of ideas. It began with communism.
Marx. Yeah. Okay.
Marx.
Yeah.
In fact, the first chapter is from Marx to Mahatma and
back.
Mahatma to Marx and back.
Yeah.
Correct.
But you see, the thinking or the feeling that the young people are not interested in Mahatma Gandhi is something that I have not experienced.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about only India.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And the reason I ask also is because sometimes you feel there is an entire transmission loss, right, between what happened, let's say 3 decades ago or 4 decades ago and today. That there is a whole, all this transmission disappeared into ether, and we are really trying to rebuild the whole thing again.
Let me tell you, Govind, that in the past 2 years since the publication of the book, I have made efforts not only to talk about the book and Mahatma Gandhi and how the correlation between the spinning wheel and the internet. To Indian audiences. I have been invited to give talks on Mahatma Gandhi on the theme of the book in different places around the world. I have given talks on Mahatma Gandhi in China, including in the Communist Party School of China.
Okay.
And you know what the response of one of the persons was? What we miss in China is Gandhi. We had Mao, but had we also had Gandhi, things would have been different.
They discarded Confucius also. So
now they are bringing Confucius back.
Yes.
Huh?
Now they're bringing him back.
So, he's a global citizen. I have given talks about Mahatma Gandhi very recently in Turkey, in Egypt, in Tunisia. These are Muslim countries, and you should see.
There seems to be some correlation between the Arab Spring, and you've talked about that, right?
Exactly,
and Gandhi's own mobilization.
People, it's all there on the internet.
Yeah.
In the Indian embassy, they had a competition of artists from Egypt and India. What would Gandhi have been? What would his response have been to the Arab Spring, and especially all the things that happened in Tahrir Square, and some of the paintings that the Egyptian artists created, as a tribute to Mahatma Gandhi. Amazing that they see in Gandhi a ray of hope. For them, be it Taksim Square in Istanbul or Tahrir Square in Cairo or in other parts of the world, they see hope in Mahatma Gandhi.
So there is no doubt he's getting a second wind as an iconic figure. But Sudheendra, just to ask you this, I mean, a lot of people put it facetiously that the easiest way to emulate Gandhi is in a fancy dress competition, because you need a dhoti and a staff. You don't need much more. But otherwise, it's a very harsh, personal way of living life, it seems from the outside, in the way he dresses, in the way he thinks, in the way he eats, because there's a lot of introspection, there's a lot of kind of self-punishment. Now, you have obviously also interacted with a lot of youngsters today. Do you think that there is something which they will find appealing so that they can emulate far more easily?
See, it's certainly, if I think that there is a quest amongst the young people, not only in India, but all around the world, for...
But is it also more around the world than in India?
I won't think so.
Okay.
It's around the world, including in India. It's
And
just
the
that,
reason I
it's
ask
just
is-
that you
yeah.
see, what has happened is that somehow we have just iconified Mahatma Gandhi without really a deeper understanding of what he stood for, what he did, and what the relevance of that for today's reality is. Because let's face it, today's world is technology driven, and for various reasons that we discussed earlier, he is considered somehow anti-technology.
Very
But
regressive, that's the popular belief.
But if only they knew what he really thought of technology, he was so modern. In fact, I have tried to, I'm the thesis of my book. There are thousands of books on Mahatma Gandhi. What I have tried to do in my book is how the internet, digital technologies are going to validate, Gandhi. I'll give just one example, Govind. 3D printing. That's the future of the internet. Molecular manufacturing. If you permit me,
Please.
I'll show you. The Economist. Economist is a highly prestigious magazine in the world. It, in 2012, it had a cover feature on 3D printing. It was called the Third Industrial Revolution, and I've said, vindicating Gandhi's vision of Swadeshi and production by the masses, The Economist affirms that the digitization of manufacturing through 3D printing, versatile robots and new materials, all this will transform and decentralize the way goods are made. You see, people think that Gandhi was so, outdated. He talked of decentralization. But technology, tomorrow's technology, what is
doing
3D
precisely
printing?
that, yeah.
3D printing is going to be just as you have ATM, anytime money, it's going to be anytime manufacturing and anywhere manufacturing. Now, this is what, which means that manufacturing is going to be now decentralized. It's going to be more and more person specific and community specific.
And that fits with his thing of Swadesh.
So,
and,
no mass manufacturing, and therefore not all this advertising business, just overproduction and making people buy what they don't really need. Much of all this is going to be outdated in the decades to come, and therefore I'm saying that technology is going to make Gandhi not just relevant but true.
But this is in complete contrast to the enduring myth perhaps of Gandhi, that he was regressive, he was anti-progress, he was anti-industrialization, stuff like that.
Ayaz.
And why has it been like that?
People, this is where we really need to, there are some irrefutable evidence. In 1945, for example, Gandhiji writes a letter to Nehru. Everybody knew that with the end of the Second World War, independence was approaching. Sooner or later, India would be free. So Gandhiji initiates a very important correspondence with Nehru, saying that India is going to be free and we should discuss what should India be like after it attains independence. And there he presents his dream of the future India, and he very clearly says that we should have the best of technology, the state of the art communication technology. I mean, it's all there.
Right.
So people are not aware. So on the one hand, he was a personification of spirituality, but he also had deep faith in the power of science and technology. But science and technology not for exploitation,
Right.
not for violence, not
Yeah.
for wars.
And not for creating bombs and
Yes.
so on. Yeah, that's he specifically talked about.
Yeah.
Sudheendra, we've run out of time. Right. So thank you so much, Ayaz. Thank you, Sudheendra. I think that was an excellent understanding of Sudheendra's book, Music of the Spinning Wheel. It's a long book,
Music
but
of the Spinning Wheel, Mahatma Gandhi's manifesto for the internet age.
Internet
That's
age,
the
yes.
operative
It's a
That's
manifesto
yeah.
for the internet age.
And that's where you're watching this
On
this
the
broadcast on the internet. Thank you very much, and hope to see you again on the India Hangout.